So I went to Davidson College, and Davidson College still today, I believe, and when I went there, certainly, I know it has an honor code today, and the honor code is a big way that Davidson is organized. And one of the biggest violations you could make of the honor code was to plagiarize work.
Yes.
You know, so as somebody who, in their teenage years and early 20s was super just careful about not plagiarizing work, to have AI write every first draft I do, that's a shift. How do you think about that? And how should everybody be thinking about if they're concerned about, well, this is not my original work?
Yeah.
How should they be thinking about that these days?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And by the way, I recently wrote a blog piece about this just because I was getting so many questions about it. And so if anybody wants to dive more into this, you can just search Richard Culatta AI and cheating, and you'll get a whole bunch of information about it. But let me tell you this. Look, we've got to reassess our original work thing. Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I was talking to my to my wife the other day, who's a professional musician, very talented musician, and we talk about composition, and when somebody writes a piece of music, right? All of our Western music is all based on ideas from the
Sure.
classical composers,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
like, let's not pretend that we're the inventors of all of our ideas. Now, that is not to suggest that there isn't unique value add that people bring to something. I don't mean to say that at all, but just this idea that like we aren't already tying to works of others is I think a little misleading. I think what is so critical, and this is the big shift we need to pay attention to, is what are the areas where we really need humans to add value, and then just be transparent about that. For example, we were the other day hosting. We actually hosted a big event. And we hosted a an art competition. This was an art competition for students who were telling stories through art, and it was AI generated art.
Hmm.
Now, interestingly enough, if you went and talked to those students and said, "Is this your art?" They would say, "Absolutely, it's my art. It came from my ideas. I had to regenerate and reprogram the AI until I got what I want." Right. Now, if you said to them, "Did you paint that?" They'd say, "No, of course I didn't paint it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a painter."
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. And so I think it's just being clear by what we mean. If the thing that we are measuring, if I am having a class and I am measuring somebody's painting ability, their ability to use a paintbrush, it would be totally inappropriate to use AI and say, "I painted this," right?
So,
If
the analogy I'm thinking of as you describe that is in the early days of humankind, the paintings were on cave walls, and then canvas was developed, and we painted on canvas, and then
Sure.
photography came around, and we would create art through photography. Is this
Right.
just another step in that lineage?
Exactly. And it's such a great example that you brought up is this idea of, you'd say everybody who's a photographer is cheating. They're
Yeah,
cheating because they just click and
right. They
it's
didn't
there.
have
They
to
didn't have to
paint it.
paint that. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, no photographer said they painted it. They weren't saying they were a painter. They're saying they're a photographer. And so I think we got to really think about that. And part of what this means, Scott, is being brave enough to realize that there are some things that we ask students to do that really is not a good use of their time. I have a kid who's in just recently graduated, and he's in college now. One of his senior activities, we spent a lot of time formatting a document he'd written in MLA style, right?
Hmm.
Lots of time, lots of review. What a terrible use of time. Nobody ever in their life is going to need to manually format MLA style. That is gone now,
Yeah.
right? So taking that time, that is time that was taken away from deeper level learning. And I thought, a great, just sort of one final example to make this point. I was talking to a bunch of teachers once, and they were really concerned about mostly English teachers. They were concerned about how this was going to destroy all of their work. And there's another group of teachers that were just kind of laughing, and it got to the point where it was actually a little distracting. And I stopped and I said, "Sorry, pause for a second. Like, what's going on? What's so funny?" And they said, "Oh, sorry, we really didn't mean to be disruptive, but we're math teachers." And I said, "Okay, like, does that mean you're obnoxious in meetings? Like, what's the deal?" And they said, No, look, we've been through this before." I said, "What do you mean AI is new?" And they said, "Yeah, AI is new, but calculators."
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
had a moment where calculators came in, and we thought it is going to destroy math as we know it. It will ruin everybody's brains and nobody will be able to do math. And then he turned to his group and he said, how many of you require a calculator in your class? All of their hands went up.
Require. That's interesting.
Require.
Yeah,
All of their
yeah.
hands went up. They
That's
said, it
interesting.
doesn't mean we don't want to see basic mathematics. We do need to know that they
Yeah.
understand basic computation. But once they do, we can go far further into
And faster.
concepts
Yeah.
faster
Yeah.
by using the calculator. And they just said, we know for sure that our English teachers and other teachers, they will catch up to this too. They just have to go through what we already went through with calculators. And at some point they will understand that we can now go far deeper into the skills we need to when we're not spending so much time on the logistics of writing.
To pull back the lens from a writing example and just more generally, from your experience as an educator, as a leader, and you can think about it, you've been in both the private sector and the public sector, and now the nonprofit sector. You've been in all the sectors. What's the best way? What are the best ways? There's no one single best way. What are some of the best ways to coach people, teach people, whatever verb you want to use, how to do higher order thinking, how to go deeper in their thinking? Because I think everything you've said so far and everything I've read, that's what's going to keep humans in the game,
Right.
right? Is that kind of value added critical thinking that can't be replicated online. So, what have you learned about that, and what would you pass on to folks listening to this or watching us that they can implement wherever they are as leaders?
I mean, I think let me just pause for a second because I think this is the most important question we need to be asking. When I talk to schools or companies and they're worried about cheating with AI, and I'm like, you are just focusing all your energy on the wrong thing, right? What you brought up, that's what we got to focus on, which is how do we make sure that we are not just replacing, we do a lot of these sort of laborious sort of logistic tasks right now as humans, far too many of those. And if all we do is just move those over to AI and don't reinvest that time into deeper, deeper, more meaningful, engaged activities, we have not come out ahead, right? That is not. So I think those are the conversations we need to have, which is how does, again, we'll just take this example of my kid, right? How does the fact that he is no longer spending so much time doing an early initial draft or formatting something for a particular style, how does that free him up? And what should he be doing with that time? That's the question we need to be asking. Now, in that particular case, I think it's should be spending far more time refining it. And generally, that's my answer, right? I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way, or if, maybe some of your listeners do, that we spend so much time just getting basic tasks done that I don't have the time to put into the refining that I would want to on a presentation, on something I'm writing, even just on my thinking. And so if I can be smarter about offloading some of the basic block and tackle, drafting of things to AI, can that allow me to have a bit more time to go deeper into refining my work and my thinking? That's what we need to be careful of. But if we're not careful, truly, if we're not careful, that can get eroded, and we end up again just sort of replacing the logistical part and not getting the benefit out of the extra refining and time that we need to be putting in.